The first thing I think when you're a leader is you have to be very focused on what is the impact you want to make. 40% of cancers are preventable. Don't smoke. Number one, do not do that. Biggest driver of cancer deaths is lung cancer.
Michelle Mitchell is CEO of Cancer Research UK and joins us to explore what it really takes to lead a mission-driven organisation.
One of the best pieces of career advice I've ever had was just get stuff done. We know more now about cancer than we've ever done before, how to prevent, diagnose and treat it. AI and data have got a huge role to play, not just in research, but also in the NHS.
With AI, personalised medicine and early diagnosis transforming outcomes.
We are in a golden age of cancer research, 100%, and that's being fueled by data and technology.
What it means to lead with purpose. From strategic focus to emotional resilience, Michelle shares what keeps her grounded in the fight to save lives.
Today's program is brought to you by two fantastic organizations. First up is Studio Space, a leading on-demand marketing agency platform. Studio Space gives marketers complete control over their projects, from matching the right agency to your brief, to managing contracts and invoicing, and even tracking all of your spend data all in the one place. They take care of everything and it's totally hassle-free. They even guarantee the work. So check out Studio Space today. Our second sponsor is the Marketing Skills Trust, a charity with a mission to make marketing a better place for everyone. They provide grants to help create a more equitable industry and support initiatives that really do drive diversity, inclusion, and create opportunity. The trust has been instrumental in leveling up the marketing skills across the board. And do take a look at their website for more information. Now, let's get on with the show.
Welcome, Michelle. Fantastic to have you on the show with us today.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here.
Very good. Well, it's been a little while in the making, but such a privilege to have you on. You're leading one of the most trusted and largest charities in the UK. And we're going to get into science and leadership and so on. But before we do, what was the moment when you realised that your career was going to be about fighting something more and bigger than yourself?
Well, that's a great first question to start us off with. Well, I grew up in Merseyside in the early 80s, and it was a time of recession, and I would say characterised by lost opportunity. So one of the things that became very important for me was really identifying and seeing a sense of injustice in my street, in my town, in my community, and seeing that at a larger scale in the country and around the world. And I've got such a deep belief in the power of people to affect positive change that I think my upbringing actually had a really positive influence on me, not in the sense that I felt defeated by a lack of opportunity, but in fact the opposite, that I saw the power that people have to affect change when they come together and change the world for good.
Wow, that's a big power of people and justice. So this is
no small issues.
No small issues, and we'll come back to there is inequality in relation to cancer treatment, as you well know. But just so how has that then nurtured that notion of the power of people? Because I suppose back then you didn't have a big organisation at your behest. So how have you developed that?
Well, firstly was the belief I had in myself. So I was the first in my family to go to university. Not that I was the brightest, my grandmother, my mother, my father, my aunts and uncles just didn't have the opportunity. And I think that was an incredibly important step for me to also step out of where I grew up and have the opportunity to go to Manchester University, where I studied economics, was my first degree. And that taught me what was possible. It gave me a broader perspective. And through that, I then went on to have my first job in the Houses of Parliament as a research assistant. And I got to know how Parliament and public policy and politics worked. And I thought, that route isn't for me. Politics isn't a route for me, but charities are. And charities are because I think they're the most incredible vehicle for social positive change, which is built on people from all sorts of different backgrounds, all sorts of different experiences coming together, largely to say what we have today isn't good enough and we can and should do better, whether that's in beating cancer or tackling pensioner poverty or making sure people have access to the medicine and treatments they need, or giving children better protection in their homes and communities. All of those issues have been part of my professional career, and I felt that there's always been a strong case that we could and should do better, and it's through charities that I think we can be advocates for social change.
Michelle, wow. So many things have struck with me here. So first of all, welcome. Fantastic to have you
We're
on.
right into it already, aren't we?
Yeah. We've gone right deep. Two things struck me, two phrases more like. The first was lost opportunity, and it's, I think, something that we should talk more about. But maybe linked to that is the notion that charities exist, as you say, because something isn't right with what we have, the status quo today, and it's ripe for change. So maybe you could describe in your own world at Cancer Research some of the things that you think we're progressing towards that are not right today that are ripe for change.
Yeah. So the first thing is we are in a golden age of cancer research, 100%, and that's being fueled by data and technology. So the things that we understand about how we can prevent, diagnose and treat cancer being advanced daily, monthly, yearly, and we know more about those things than we've ever known before. And that means we're in this fantastic position where, because of decades worth of investment in research from people like me and you and many of our listeners, we've seen a doubling of cancer survival in the last 50 years. So this is a story of hope first. The second thing is not all cancers, the detection, diagnosis and treatment of them are progressing at the same speed. And that's because, for example, we have hard-to-reach cancers, esophageal, lung cancer, many brain cancers, pancreatic cancers, where we don't know enough yet. We don't identify them and can't early, and people are dying far too soon. So, story of hope, more to do, and increasingly we're building the knowledge and evidence around how deprivation and inequality is a cancer issue as well, because many people from our more deprived communities are dying far too early.
Wow, you touched on it. So actually, total story of hope, and I'm so glad that that's the ilk of which we're coming at it from. And you touched upon that thought that perhaps there's some socioeconomic areas which are more highly impacted than others. But if just for a moment, kind of zooming out, I mean, it's one of those conditions that really scare me shitless. I mean, it really is. You know, one of those big sort of life things keep you up at night type of things. And you know, from a sort of a place of not knowing, sort of the stats are sort of 1 in 3 of us may well encounter this in our lifetime, if not ours, someone that we know.
Well, it's 1 in 2 of us will
Wow.
have cancer in our lifetime. And for many of us, particularly those that are diagnosed earlier, stages 1 and 2,
Yep.
rather than 3 and 4, will be treated and will go on to live 10 plus more years. But early diagnosis is absolutely critical. Take bowel cancer.
Yep.
If you're diagnosed at the latest stages of bowel cancer, you've got a 10% survival rate. If you're diagnosed at the earliest stages of bowel cancer, it's 90%. So early diagnosis is absolutely critical, as well as new tests, new treatments to tackle the many different types of cancers there are. And that's one of the areas we're focusing on, because early diagnosis saves lives.
And just to that end, it's my perception as the layman that cancer is absolutely on the rise. Perhaps it always has been there. Maybe awareness is a different thing. But I wonder why. Why is this disease something that is afflicting us in the way in 1 in 2 people these days? I don't know if it was the same in times gone by.
So the really important thing to understand is the mortality rate for cancer is declining. But the incidence rate, more people are getting it, primarily in the UK because we have an ageing population.
Right.
But more people are surviving with cancer than ever before. So it's quite an intricate message, isn't it? Think about it. Over decades, fewer people are dying
Yes.
of cancer per rate of the population.
Yes.
More people are likely to get it in the future, primarily because we have an ageing population. And the older you are, the more likely to have cancer. And we've never had as many tests, treatment options for people, which particularly for cancers where you can diagnose early, people are surviving a lot longer.
Got it.
And there's lots you can do about it. So, nearly 40% of cancers are preventable.
Oh, wow.
Don't smoke. Number one, do
Yep.
not do that. Talked about cancer inequalities. It still remains the case. The biggest driver of cancer deaths is lung cancer. And for many, that's because of smoking. So don't smoke, have a healthy weight, have a good and varied diet,
Yes.
exercise, stay safe in the sun. At a population level, that can reduce your risk by nearly 40%.
Brilliant.
These are great questions, Richie. I suppose I, to some extent, taken a bit for granted because I've been a little bit involved myself. But you asked some really good questions, and it shows that the scale and complexity of this conversation is enormous. So within that, Michelle, for you personally, how do you stay on top of all of this, all the moving parts, stay grounded? Because it's a swirling, whirling vortex that is the fight against cancer.
Yeah, so it's a fight worth having and one we're winning, by the way. So the first thing I think when you're a leader is you have to be very focused on what is the impact you want to make. And beating cancer is a long-term game, as we know. So having that golden star, North Star, which is impact, I think then you have to set, as a leader, the long-term strategic direction of the organisation. For us, that's not 1 year or 2 years. That's often 10 and 20 years because beating cancer is a long-term game. And then you have to mobilise your resources, really probably over a 3-year period, and say, what are your choices? What are your priorities? Where do you want to invest to make the shifts that are necessary for your success? And then the fourth thing for me is really build the broadest possible coalition you can. Everybody's touched by cancer. 1 in 2 of us will get cancer. So build a broad coalition, whether that's Nobel Prize winners, clinicians, doctors, nurses, marathon runners, volunteers in our shops, our staff, and everybody else. Build that coalition because everybody's got something to bring to the table to accelerate progress against our mission. And finally, for me, is run your organisation and your mission really responsibly. Have a view to fairness, supporting and tackling inequalities, and also ensure you're making your contribution to the planet as well and being sustainable in how you run yourself. So that would be the leadership side of it in my mind. And then how do I keep grounded? I spend a lot of time with all the key people that our mission matters to, often with cancer patients, some of whom have thankfully found out they're cancer-free. Others are in the middle of treatment and they don't know what their future will be. And incredibly moving for me is I have the absolute privilege of being with people, often at the end of their life, in their final days, weeks, months mark. And do you know what they choose to do? They give their time with their last breath and they come and tell the story about why research matters, why they want advances in science and research and innovation to benefit others, not just themselves. And that is hugely, hugely grounding and privileged for me. It's quite upsetting. I mean, I find it inspiring and upsetting at the same time because it gives you a sense of the sheer goodness in people. And then, other really important groups, the scientists who are out there trying to make major advances in how we understand, prevent and diagnose cancer, and what are the barriers for them to do that. Often it is money. We need to raise more money because we're turning down forefront outstanding science. This could be one of the major breakthroughs. So although we are large as a charity, the mission is large too. And then all the other people who matter. In my role, I have the great privilege of meeting our volunteers. Many senior business leaders give their time and counsel to us and to me. And, those things keep me grounded in what matters and give me a real sense of urgency about why we have to and must go faster.
Well, it wasn't deliberate, but I think you just gave a massive call to action for everybody to lean in and support and donate and volunteer and be part of the fight.
And it's ours, right?
Yeah.
It's not. One of the things I think is so special, as you can see, I think many things are very special about Cancer Research UK, is it belongs to everybody. People are proud of what we do. They're proud of their contribution. And I've worked really hard to make sure we have a culture where that contribution is really valued in the many different guises it comes from people.
So the story of from Manchester, first person to university, you talk about hope. You're a very positive person. You come across as very ambitious and positive, which is inspiring. But also, I'm guessing, it hasn't always been perfect. So amidst all of this, have there been times when you've doubted yourself or had to take stock, have a word with yourself along the way?
No.
Love it.
I know you want me to say yes, and it was deeply different. I haven't
Never
really.
doubted.
I've never
Amazing.
had that doubt. I'm not an odd person. It's just I feel that it's a privilege to do the roles that I have. I'm very conscious that if I didn't feel I was the best person to do them, I would move away from the roles very quickly and let someone else lead that mission. I would say where I've found extreme support very helpful for me was probably, in addition to all the professional support I get. So I'm so lucky to be surrounded by very wise, sensible people who give their time and their advice as a gift and are there to support me and support our leadership team. But there's two times probably at a personal level. One was when my mum was extremely ill, so she was in hospital for 6 months and was dying, really. And I worked at Age UK at the time, and my chief exec was incredibly supportive. I moved to condensed hours for 6 or 7 months before she died, which enabled me to commute back to the Wirral, spend time with her. That was really important to me. It was really important to me that I had that flexibility. And then rather than a professional challenge, a personal challenge, I have the absolute delight of 2 children, born within 15 months of each other. The word sleep and sleep and sleep. I was pretty scarred by a lack of sleeping of my lovely children for about 5 years. And again, I had some flexibility in the first year or so when I came back from maternity leave, promoted both times actually from maternity leave. But that flexibility at that time meant such a huge amount to me and my ability to flourish in work, to continue on my career progression and, to do a great job and feel very motivated to do that.
Michelle, I can so relate to
the lack of
sleep. Oh my God! So
How old are you? What's the difference between your kids, Richie?
So Yvonne, my eldest, is 6, and Sophie is 5, and they're a year and a day apart. So I perhaps just, as you were describing the first 5 years, but probably just about getting our sleep back consistently. Although inevitably during the week, one or two of them will walk into the room, and no doubt we have to give them lots of cuddles along the way. So I totally get it.
I think at my son and daughter's wedding, their 21st birthday, their 18th birthday, I won't be able to stop myself but saying something about the lack of sleep.
Oh God, I'm like I say, I just maybe past the eye of the storm in that one. But I wanna take us back a little bit, because your first job outside of finishing your degree at Manchester, by the way, congratulations, economics, Manchester, like, phenomenal, wow, quite an achievement there in itself. But you went into politics, and I wonder intersection between sort of politics and the likes of the charity sector. I'm sure there's an important way in which they intersect, and they need to intersect in that regard. But at the moment, there's quite a brain drain of talent that either doesn't get into politics or indeed decides they want to go into pastures new. And I wondered if tell us a little bit more about the role of policy when it comes to the likes of research and how they do intersect. And is it a winning or a losing game here in the UK vis-a-vis other parts of the world, the US, places like that, when it comes to cancer research?
Yeah, so a couple of things. We're primarily driven by a belief that research and the translation of that research will save lives. But it won't alone do that. What you need is, for example, the funding and the conditions in place for cancer research to thrive. So we would have very clear evidence and public policy about what needs to change to make that happen, whether that's speeding up implementation and adoption of innovation, making sure cancer research is funded properly. We're one of the world's best places, really world-class and leading in our institutes and centres, but we want that to continue into the future. We want to attract the very best talent, so we'd have a view on the visa system and getting the very best talent in. Brexit hit us hard in the cancer research community, coming out of a research programme called Horizons, going back into it. So there you would see, right, you've got to have the right conditions in place. So we would make a case to government. But we also work very strongly in identifying the evidence, the policy and the strategy that's needed to make sure not just research conditions are right, but that cancer outcomes improve and are some of the best in the world. And at the moment, despite incredible research and innovation, cancer outcomes are lagging behind comparable countries who've seen a faster rate of improvement than across the UK. So our role there is to work with governments in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, as well as Westminster, to say, here's what's needed in the health system and beyond to make sure that we improve and accelerate early diagnosis, that people have timely access to treatments, that we put the policy and the legislation in place to prevent more cancers, not least about the tobacco and vapes bill that's before Parliament at the moment.
Yep.
And we also present the innovations that we've tried and tested, which we believe should be rolled out across the country. So one more recent one was on risk stratified lung screening. So if you've smoked or you're over a certain age, we believe you should have screening for lung cancer. We built the evidence base for that and ran a pilot, and then that was reviewed and rolled out, and is being rolled out across England at the moment, likely pretty soon the rest of the UK, and that's resulting in significant improvements in lung cancer diagnosis and therefore treatment. So we've got a big role. We work cross-party, we're not political, but drawing on your themes as well, Mark, it's where's the goal you want to go for? Build the evidence base and the solutions that will solve the problem or the goal, help you achieve the goal, and then build the broadest coalition of support, political and other pressures, so that it's a compelling case for change.
Yeah. Interestingly, 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was sitting in exactly this sofa and I was interviewing a wonderful, wonderful guy, Louis. And Louis was telling me about how in his about 6 months prior, literally through sort of no symptoms whatsoever, he ended up getting colon cancer. And he literally just, no pain differential, wouldn't have known lifestyle changes and what, like totally undetectable. And it was perhaps very, very small minor tweaks and changes that took him to the GP. And he was talking about how he's early 30s when this happened to. And it struck me that, you talk about cancer predominantly being for people in later life, and yet a young man, fit, healthy, seemed to have also now is increasing, the stages with cancer is being inflicted in that sense.
Well, it is a worrying trend because we're seeing this worldwide, particularly in relation to bowel cancer. We have a major research program called the Cancer Grand Challenges with the National Cancer Institute and other foundations and philanthropists around the world, and we fund large-scale teams, £20 million funding programs, and one of them is looking at why exactly across the world, this isn't a UK phenomena, has there been an alarming increase in the rate of bowel cancer
Amongst young people. Wow.
Now, remember, it's still a relatively small amount, but a
A little spike maybe,
increase.
Yep.
We don't know exactly why, and this is what this team is investigating, because this is a worldwide phenomena. But a number of hypotheses underpin that, including potentially, a study recently had identified a link back to infections in an earlier age, including E. coli, changes in diet, changes in exercise, other environmental factors. So what this team is doing is investigating around the world, not only why is it happening and giving us some evidence for that, but what can we do to address that issue.
Just one more thing, because what Louis was saying, which I thought was
Because we're not just UK wide. I mean, we have a
by the way,
global.
Louis lived in Ireland, interestingly enough, in that sense, and originally from France too. So I totally get that global nature of the problem. But interestingly, what he said was marketing saved his life. So the link to what we do, in that, I think 10 years prior, he was sitting in his GP's office and one day saw a leaflet on the table which sort of said, look out for X, Y, Zs and what have you. And I think that's what he was describing as the trigger point, remembering that those moments that meant that kind of actually went where he went and sort of sought help as a consequence of remembering those sort of things. And I wonder to what extent, and maybe this comes a bit preventative, but to what extent do you see marketing as an important component in perhaps things like prevention or indeed early diagnosis and things like that?
Well, it's actually a critical component of it, because we have to raise awareness of the signs and symptoms of cancer across whole population groups. In fact, in the UK, compared to many other countries, people are quite cautious about going forward to their GP, especially with vague symptoms where you think, I'm not quite, I don't quite feel right. And so, we continuously encourage people, when something's not quite right for you, go and get it tested. So marketing has a key role there. But take another example. I mean, one of the proudest moments in our history has been our involvement through our scientists, initially in the development between the link with the HPV and cervical cancer, and then the development of the vaccine, the clinical trials that we run, the influencing of the screening program that's got set up. Young boys and girls are vaccinated now in the UK. We're at a point where Professor Peter Sassini, published some evidence a couple of years ago, which said for those girls who were vaccinated in the early 2000s, there's been a 90% reduction in the incidence of cervical cancer. 90% reduction, and we're at the point where we think we can eliminate it as a public health issue in the UK. However, what we're seeing is in some communities across the UK, falling rates of participation in cervical screening, falling rates in the take-up of the HPV vaccine. So where we also have a role for marketing, as well as the macro raise general awareness of signs and symptoms or target for specific groups, there are some community level micro targeting, which would be extremely helpful, because we have the science and we have the the opportunity to eliminate a cancer, cervical cancer. So marketeers will have a key role in persuading communities and individuals where there's hesitancy.
Exactly.
So an exciting
It is
opportunity.
very exciting.
HPV is just such a standout triumph, but there's so many, and I hadn't realised how many of the drugs that are used globally, how many of the people who are treated in the UK and globally, CRUK has had its pause on that.
I think the
triumphs.
peer-reviewed word is had a role in.
Okay, had a role in
8 in 10 in the UK.
Yeah, there you go.
In
So
the UK,
who knew?
yeah.
Who knew? But of course the fight goes on, as you said. So what some of the really juicy innovations that are going to be coming through in the next 5 years or so? I mean, I probably couldn't have that conversation without mentioning AI at some point. But what's really exciting you about the next few
Gosh,
years?
it is a golden age. You know, this isn't rhetoric. It's the absolute truth. We know more now about cancer than we've ever done before, how to prevent, diagnose and treat it. And data and AI are speeding up that process. So some hot areas probably are thinking about the opportunities for personalised or precision medicine. So getting the right treatment at the right time to an individual. You know, our ability to profile DNA, sample people's tumours and work out which is the very best treatment for them. It's hugely exciting, isn't it? You've seen a continued interest in immunotherapy, so using your own immune system to tackle cancer. I think that's a very lively and interesting area. Lots of interest in cancer vaccines as well. Looking at both how they can help slow down and reduce the impact of cancer in some cancer types, but some interesting novel research in them as a preventative measure as well. So it's a very lively field. And as you say, AI and data have got a huge role to play, not just in research, but also in the NHS. So when you look at the NHS, the opportunity to take pressure off highly skilled people. For example, we've done a multi-year program with DeepMind looking at mammography and training AI models to identify and detect cancer with some very strong evidence about the value of that alongside highly trained medics. So can alleviate pressure, but also can digitize what are pretty outdated services and hopefully reduce the cost and make them more efficient and effective. And on the research side, we've funded another Cancer Grand Challenge, particularly looking at, in Cambridge with Professor Hannon, looking at building the Google map of cancer. So looking how cancer develops in real time, working with teams across the world to predict and analyse the best way to tackle and beat cancer in those circumstances. So it's
so exciting.
so exciting.
Actually, Mark, I want to come on to you for a moment because clearly you're a trustee at Cancer Research UK, and I know it's something that you've been aspiring to and wanted to do for a number of years now. Clearly, on the back of the efforts that you made with the Sprintathon, which have been a fantastic achievement in
Big round of
itself.
applause.
Yeah, absolutely. But I just wonder, what piqued your interest? Perhaps what surprised you about, when you've taken up this role? What have you learned since you've taken up this role that has been interesting, that perhaps would be insightful for us to learn about, to hear from?
Yeah, thank you, Richard. So yeah, I mean, I have been involved in a manner of speaking for a while. My dad died from neck cancer. My mother-in-law died from leukemia, and my wife, for the most part of her career, was a leukemia nurse. So that was a bit cruel to kind of see what was coming. And she worked in bone marrow transplantation in Nottingham, where it was quite leading edge. And so roughly 1 in 2 would walk out, 1 in 2 wouldn't. So it's hard stuff. So that, I suppose that was the why for the Sprintathon. And that's been an amazing adventure along the way. So as a trustee, a different lens. So I suppose the role of a trustee is partly this sort of governance and oversight, but it's so much more than that, which is just sort of willing the organisation to succeed, And so actually, there's valuable is all the stuff that we do offline to support the team. And what's so striking is every trustee is so willing to give time and effort and energy, even though they're very, very busy people.
Yeah.
But the organisation...
And impressive.
Yeah,
group.
This Cancer Grand Challenges thing, I was sat next to a guy who's invented 4 drugs for child cancer.
Wow.
And then one of the speakers is like a shoe-in for a Nobel Prize or something. So it's impressive. But the scale and the complexity of the organisation, it's the biggest fundraiser in the UK.
It's amazing.
To fund some of the most leading edge and important research. So I think it's just such an impressive organisation with such a good intent. And there's a lot of chats around marketing business around purpose-led. Right at its very core. And so you get people, so there's people who have come from other organisations that in the last couple of years have said, purpose is no longer part of our, Unilever have done some reversals, who have been principled enough to say, well, I'm going to leave this job and this role and this sector to come and work for Cancer Research UK because I am purpose-led, I care, and that's where I want to put my time
And do you
effort.
feel that at Cancer Research UK, that's clear the minute you come through the door or pick up the phone or talk to people?
Because everyone's got a story. So it was with Joanne the other day about Race for Life, and we were talking to some CMOs, and it's the classic punchline. She tells a story about somebody who ultimately died from cancer, and then the obvious reveal is that it was her dad. Mm-hmm. And I just find it so powerful. I've spent half my time welling up thinking about it because it's, this is really lives and livelihoods in a way that often marketing isn't.
Yeah, it is meaningful, very meaningful. Michelle, just turning back to you for a moment and going back to, as you were describing in the introduction, that whole notion of a lost opportunity. And so I'm from up north. I grew up, spent my teenage years near Carlisle, just on the borders in just above Gretna Green, a neighboring town. And I would suggest that too, places like that. In fact, me coming down to London to start my career was near impossible. In fact, career counsellors almost shunned you because they probably, I don't know, lack of experience of themselves. And I wonder, to what extent you see the north-south divide kind of even coming across even to today. In fact, I was actually at Merseyside not so long ago myself.
You mean the People's Republic of Merseyside?
Indeed. And I love that. Actually, I went and saw the Unilever estate.
The Port Sunlight.
Port Sunlight. There we go. And it was a wonderful walk around memory lane in many respects. But I just love to get your take on, how you see opportunities in today's landscape, and whether you do believe that there is these divisions that still exist up and down our country.
Yeah, well, I'd start with cancer. So, people don't fully appreciate that deprivation is a significant driver for cancer outcomes. So, you're much more likely to smoke.
Yes, of course.
And therefore, you're much more likely to die earlier. But it's not just that, when you think about it. You're likely to be diagnosed later with cancer, often at A&E, when your cancers have progressed significantly. And if you remember, I talked about the importance of early diagnosis. You're likely to cite a poorer experience as you go through your cancer treatment. And so one of the things we want to do is put in place, challenge those things. It shouldn't be the case that people die younger of cancer because they're in more deprived areas. So we've got to tackle what the causes of that are. And we've got a big focus on understanding cancer inequalities better. Some of the reasons are biological, not social. So really, really understand that. Make sure clinical trials are representative of everybody.
Yeah.
Not always the case. And thirdly, really get the NHS geared up to make the type of interventions where, for example, you put in place legislation to stop future generations smoking tobacco. Over 70% of people who smoke die of smoking. I mean, can you imagine any other product legally being available talk about...
And vaping as well? What's that? What's the difference in that sense?
So I can perhaps come on to that.
Yeah.
But in terms of lost lives, these are people dying early. So let's make it, A, illegal to buy it, B, for younger generations, make it more expensive, so tax more, and then critically give people the smoking cessation services they need to get off, because smoking is an addiction. It's incredibly, incredibly hard to stop smoking. The second is make sure the NHS is geared up to and funded properly to diagnose cancers earlier in all of our communities, not just the wealthiest communities, in all of our communities.
There's a difference there between how the NHS operate in different communities?
Well, what you need to operate differently, don't you? I mean, so you need a flexibility of model that, for example, if you're working in an inner city area or rural, high rates of deprivation, where you're experiencing people being diagnosed with cancers at stage 4 and all through A&E, that and there's long waits to get to your doctors. You know, you can't get in to see your GP, or you don't bother to go and see your GP. Then how you respond to that? You need a mix of methods to turn those problems around, and local leadership is very important, as well as clear national frameworks.
I don't think anybody could listen to this podcast and not be taken aback by some of the stats, but also encouraged by the progress. But I want to shift the attention back to you and your career, and you've done some amazing roles. And so I'm curious to know whether the balance between serendipity versus very carefully crafted, what's been the way that you've plotted your path?
I have had no career plan. People don't believe me when I say this. I mean, what I've done, retrospectively, it looks like I've had a very smart career plan, but hindsight and a good story. But the things I've focused on is, do things and work in an environment where I feel I'm quite good at the job at hand. That sounds like an obvious thing, but often people do things neither interest them, they're passionate about, and if they were honest, aren't particularly good at. So I mean, are you interested? Are you passionate? And are you good at it? Because that usually means you're going to succeed more. And then I've followed those passions and interests that motivate me, that I want to see change in. And then I've really sought to build my expertise, my knowledge over time, and always had an eye to how do I have a bigger impact at a larger scale, which has meant I have also developed, academically, professionally, as well as learnt on the job through a whole range of experiences.
So, and along the way, you must have had some good mentors and people who are giving you some critical advice and so on. The opportunity to share with anybody you want that has really helped you on your way.
Well, I have had the great pleasure of working with super smart people who have given me support, counsel, advice, and all the space just to go and have some fun and forget about it all. And so I wouldn't want to pull one person out, but they know who they are, and they've made a really big difference to me. And I think, I've been also very fortunate with the people who've been my bosses, because that makes a big difference, doesn't it? Whether you've got someone you can complement each other, that they understand you and are thoughtful about how to get the best out of you, that are good people to row a boat in a storm with. And there's been a few storms. All of that really matters.
If you were going to turn back to your time at Manchester, what would be some of the advice that you'd give your younger self?
You don't need to go to the Hacienda every night. It might be one of them.
Or maybe you do, given where you ended up.
What advice would I give? I'd say follow your... Have an opinion, right? Have a view on who you want to be and how you want to change the world and what do you see your role in it. Just have an opinion. And then be pretty bold and fearless and ambitious about the change you want to see and be that change, which is quite different to be professionally ambitious and become a CEO. That's not what I'm saying. I think it starts with something much deeper than that.
And what would you say is the change that you want to see in the world?
Well, I want to see cancer beaten within a generation, absolutely, but much more than that. You know, I want to see a world in which people are peaceful, it's loving, we come together to solve some of the big problems and create opportunity for everybody.
Within a generation. So I was lucky enough to meet a guy called Ray Kurzweil about 5 or 6 years ago. He's works for Google, but he was really one of the founders of AI back in the day, one of the originating forefathers. And he had this notion that it's possible that we could live forever. Just kind of need to outrun the bear. If all technologies are exponential, you just need to stay alive long enough for all the cures and the treatments and the medicines and so on. So I don't know exactly what my question is, but how do you sort of think about that
I don't
world?
think about that. I think, what are we going to do today?
There you go.
You know,
Yeah.
really, that might be a interesting philosophical conversation. It's certainly encouraging a whole worldwide movement around research into aging. But we face real issues today as well, and stuff we can do things about. And one of the best pieces of career advice I've ever had was just get stuff done. I mean, I didn't say stuff, it was another word, but, you know.
Stuff works.
Get stuff done. And, you know, I really value with the people I work with. I mean, we put a lot of emphasis on, you know, the intellectual side of it, you know, talked about analysis and evidence and strategy, but that has to be complemented by great people who get on and do stuff, and preferably quickly, because we haven't got a lot of time. You know, we haven't got a lot of time to waste. The issues are urgent, and we've got this incredible privileged role to mobilise people, to mobilise resource, to save people's lives. And so that urgency and pragmatism and practicality is very important as well. And you see that in abundance in the team at Cancer Research UK, that combination of the big thinking as well as the practical doing.
Yeah.
I think I know perhaps what some of these things will be, but I really want to reinforce.
Oh, don't think you know me.
well, having
Oh, I'm going to say something you're not expecting now.
Curveball moment.
I can't be boring.
But the thought being is that this is such a powerful conversation, and I really want to leave our listeners in with kind of thinking about what they could do to change, or what they could do to kind of live a healthier way of life, to, of course, indeed give them the best possible chance of not at some point having to face up to this horrendous disease. And I wonder what maybe one of the 2 or 3 of the key things that you would offer as a means to, you know, for people to take away as
Well, 3 things. One is don't smoke, have a healthy weight, take moderate amounts of alcohol, and exercise, right? So that's the action you can take yourself.
Yeah.
At a macro level. The action I would absolutely urge you to take is, if anything doesn't feel right in your own body, do not hesitate. Do not push it to the bottom of the list of the hundreds of activities we have to complete every week. Get to see your GP and find out what's wrong with you, because early diagnosis saves lives. And one of the ways in which I have fulfillment and happiness is doing things for others. So what I'd also ask your listeners to do is take action for Cancer Research UK. Donate to us, take part in an event, volunteer, campaign on the issues that matter. And each small step helps us to beat cancer together. and start small. And we have the ambition if you want to do more.
Amazing. Michelle, it's been such a privilege and a pleasure to be with you here today. You've taught us so many things. I mean, the hopes, the aspirations, the vision, as well as, how can we all personally be accountable to help solve for this problem. So just a really massive thank you for your time.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.